So, what if I told you that some of the most powerful, world shaping forces in all of biology are, well, the weakest? It sounds like a total paradox, right? But it's true. This is the story of biology's invisible architect, the force behind everything from your DNA to the lightning fast reflexes of a plant. Just take a look at this. On the left, you've got an unsuspecting fly landing on a Venus flytrap. And then, a split second later, bam! The image on the right. The trap has slammed shut. It's a truly incredible display of biological mechanics in action. But here's the kicker, and this is what's so fascinating. This plant has no muscles to contract. It has no nerves to fire off signals. So how on earth does it do this? That's the mystery we're going to unravel today. All right, so our investigation starts with the action itself, that sudden, dramatic snap. The first clue is that this has nothing to do with brute force. It's actually a hydraulic event. Yeah, the entire movement is driven by a really rapid, super precisely controlled change in water pressure inside the plant cells. Biologists have a name for it, turgor pressure. And the engine driving all of this water movement? It's a process called osmosis. Now, at its core, this is a really simple but incredibly powerful idea. Water just naturally moves to try and even things out. It flows from an area where it's more concentrated to an area where it's less concentrated, as long as there's a barrier it can pass through. And this diagram just illustrates the consequences perfectly. See, in what's called an isotonic solution, the water concentration is balanced inside and out, so the cell is perfectly happy and stable. But put that same cell in a hypertonic solution, one where there's less water on the outside, and the cell shrivels up as all its water rushes out. And in a hypotonic solution, where there's more water outside, the cell swells up like a balloon. So what this all means is that if you can control where the water is concentrated, you can control the cell's shape and its pressure. Okay, so that leads us to the next big question. If osmosis is how the water moves, what's the engine? What's actually creating this difference in water concentration that pushes the water around with enough force to snap a leaf shut? Well, to answer that, we have to zoom in and look a little deeper at the invisible particles that are dissolved in the water. We're talking about the solutes. And this is where we run into a really key principle called colligative properties. I know, it's a fancy term, but it's for a really simple and powerful idea. When it comes to osmosis, it doesn't matter what the solute particle is. It could be salt, sugar, you name it. The only thing that matters is how many of them there are. Let's break down how this works. When you dissolve solutes in water, they basically get in the way of the water molecules. They lower the effective concentration of the water itself. It's the reason why salty water freezes at a lower temperature and boils at a higher one. And, most importantly for our mystery, it's what creates osmotic pressure. So you can think of it kind of like this. A high concentration of solutes acts almost like a magnet for water. The more solute particles you cram into one place, the stronger the pull is on water from the areas around it. This is the force that's pushing the water. And now, we get to the most fundamental level, the tiny forces that govern all of these interactions. These are what I like to call biology's weak superpowers. You know, in chemistry, we always talk about the strong covalent bonds, the kind that are like the steel beams that build the structure of molecules. But the real action in biology, that happens with these other bonds, the weak, non-covalent ones. They don't form the molecules, they shape them. They aren't structural, they're dynamic. They're constantly forming and breaking. And here's that paradox again. A single one of these bonds is incredibly weak, easily broken by just the random jiggling of molecules in a cell. But their power comes from their numbers. Think of it like Velcro. One tiny hook and loop means nothing. But when you get thousands of them working together, you get a really powerful connection. It's their cumulative effect that is just enormous. And this collective strength comes from four main players. You could call them the four masterminds of weak interactions. You've got hydrogen bonds, ionic interactions, which are the attractions between charged groups, hydrophobic interactions, which push oily, nonpolar things together, and the super subtle van der Waals forces that exist between any two atoms that get close enough. And here is a perfect example. On the left, you're seeing the hemoglobin protein surrounded by this shell of water molecules. Every single one of those water molecules is held in place by a weak interaction. On the right, with the water stripped away, you can see the protein's surface. That shell of water is absolutely essential for hemoglobin to do its job, and it's held there purely by the combined strength of thousands and thousands of these tiny weak bonds. Okay, so we have all the pieces of the puzzle now: osmosis, solutes, and weak interactions. So let's put them all together and finally solve the mystery of our Venus flytrap. Okay, so here's the play-by-play. The fly touches those sensitive little trigger hairs, and that kicks off a chain reaction. The plant starts actively pumping potassium ions, those are our solutes, into the cells on the inner surface of the leaf. This instantly creates a hypertonic state inside those specific cells. And just like we saw before, following the rules of osmosis, water rushes into those cells to balance everything out, causing them to swell up really, really fast. And it's that rapid inflation on the inside of the leaf that causes the whole thing to curve inward and snap shut. It's a beautiful little osmotic engine, powered entirely by solutes. But the coolest part is that this isn't just some weird party trick for carnivorous plants. This very same principle, the collective power of weak interactions, is fundamental to pretty much everything in biology. It's what folds proteins into their incredibly complex functional shapes. It's what holds the two strands of your DNA together. It's how enzymes know what to grab onto and how hormones bind to their receptors. It's even how that sensitive Mimosa pudica plant makes its leaves droop when you touch them. So, the big takeaway from all of this is that strength in biology doesn't always come from these super powerful, rigid bonds. In fact, more often than not, it comes from the collective, dynamic, and adaptable power of countless weak interactions all working together in concert. It's just a beautiful example of how the smallest, weakest forces can combine to produce some of the most dramatic and incredible effects in the entire natural world. And it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? What other invisible forces are out there, shaping the world around us in ways we haven't even begun to see?